So our last video of chapter 5, and more importantly, our last video of the material that will be on the first exam. Bum, 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 bum. All right, so pay attention. There will be some of this on the exam for sure. So we're going to talk about membranes. You already have some familiarity with those because we talked about them in chapter 1 way back when, all those videos ago. We talked about serous membranes, the pericardium, the pleural membrane, and the peritoneal serous membrane. So this is related to that material most certainly. So membranes are anything that lines a structure or a cavity. It's going to be typically a layer of epithelia interfacing with a layer of connective tissue. There are four types or four categories of membranes. First, we have the mucous membrane we'll be talking about, the serous, which we have already fully covered in chapter 1, and the synovial. These are the three membranes that are internal membranes. And then the external membrane is the cutaneous membrane, the skin. And there's a whole chapter devoted to that material that we'll be talking about. Mucous membranes, as depicted in this picture here, have the overlying layer of epithelial tissue and the underlying layer of connective tissue. So the overlying layer of epithelial tissue can be just about many different types. It could be, as depicted here, pseudostratified. It could be columnar. Then, of course, we have the basement membrane that divides the epithelial layer from the connective tissue layer. And then below it, we have the connective tissue layer. Now, this connective tissue layer is largely going to be areolar connective tissue. And it's given a specific name called the lamina propria. So this is one of those unique names you need to know. For a mucous membrane, the inner connective tissue layer is called the lamina propria. Okay, mucous membranes. If I could have this flash and do all that, I would do it. But mucous membranes line the cavities that open to the external environment. That's their big claim to fame. Okay. So there you go, the highlights, epithelial cells, underlying CT, and that underlying CT is called the lamina propria, and it is areolar CT. Serous membranes will, in opposition to mucous membranes, line cavities that do not open to the external environment, like your pericardial cavity, your pleural cavity, and your peritoneal cavity. Now, here we have a overlying layer of epithelial tissue called the mesothelium. This is going to be simple squamous epithelia that overlies the layer of areolar CT, which are of course divided by the basement membrane. So you have the mesothelia, the basement membrane, and then below that the areolar CT. But in this case, we give a special name to the lining of the epithelial tissue. Okay. We've already talked about these three different cavities. Synovial membranes are the one exception to the rule about epithelia overlying connective tissue. There's pretty much no epithelia here, and we're just going to see some mixed content of connective tissue. But synovial membranes are found in joints. So you have them lining all your joints. You have synovial fluid in those joints. The fluid can trap carbon dioxide that's being produced, and you can get some knuckles cracking, right? The little gaps. There's no problem with doing that. You're not going to get arthritis at a later age just because you crack your knuckles. So obviously, because they are encapsulating joints, synovial membranes do not open to the exterior environment either. So no epithelium, and there's a mixed content of connective tissue. So there's no specific connective tissue, no singular connective tissue that makes up the synovial membrane. Very rich in a component called hyaluronic acid. Again, hyaluronic acid is a polysaccharide. We can see the different membrane types and associated locations of these membrane types listed here. This summarizes all this information that we were just talking about. In particular, at the bottom you can see the synovial membrane. Now for part C, for skin, again, just kind of ignore that for now. We'll be dealing with that next chapter after the big exam.